The stench of oxidized metal and plasma residue hung thick in the air of Outpost 47's salvage yard. Sarah Chen stood at the entrance, her environmental suit's filters working overtime to process the cocktail of alien atmospheres that leaked from countless derelict ships. The massive yard stretched for kilometers, a graveyard of forgotten dreams and failed ventures, where the galaxy's castoffs came to rust. Sarah adjusted her grip on her diagnostic tablet, the device's holographic display flickering with readings from the surrounding wreckage. After 15 years of breathing life back into dead ships, she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to spot potential in places others saw only waste. Today, something was calling to her from deep within the yard. "You're wasting your time, human," called out Caxley, the Galaxian yard supervisor. His crystalline skin caught the light of the system's twin suns, creating prismatic patterns on the ground. "That section contains nothing but failures. Ships deemed unworthy of even salvage by the High Engineering Council." Sarah smiled, the expression hidden behind her suit's faceplate. The Galaxians, for all their technological prowess, were prisoners of their own perfectionism. Their rigid engineering principles left no room for improvisation, for the beautiful chaos of innovation. "One species trash," she said, continuing her stride into the yard. The signal grew stronger as she ventured deeper into the maze of twisted metal and broken dreams. Past the hulks of cargo haulers, beyond the shells of decommissioned warships, until finally she stood before it, and her breath caught in her throat. The ship was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Its hull design defied conventional aerospace principles, with curves and angles that seemed to bend reality itself. Even covered in decades of cosmic dust, its surface retained an otherworldly sheen. According to her scanner, it was built from materials that shouldn't exist together, using principles that violated half a dozen laws of physics. "The impossible," Sarah whispered, reaching out to touch the hull. The metal was warm despite the void-cold air. "That's what I'll call you." "Step away from that abomination," came a new voice, sharp and commanding. Sarah turned to find herself facing 3 Galaxian engineers, their crystalline forms radiating disapproval. The speaker, distinguished by elaborate geometric patterns etched into his surface, continued, "That vessel represents the greatest embarrassment in Galaxian engineering history." "Care to elaborate?" Sarah asked, her hand still resting on the ship's hull. The lead engineer, who introduced himself as First Geometrist Valcor, sneered. "It was an attempt to break the light-speed barrier through dimensional folding. The project nearly bankrupted our science council. The principles were sound, but the execution—" He gestured dismissively. "Impossible. The power requirements alone would tear any conventional engine apart." Sarah's mind was already racing, connecting dots these crystalline perfectionists couldn't see. Their rigid thinking had blinded them to the obvious solution. What if the engine wasn't conventional? She asked. What if it could generate power through controlled chaos rather than perfect symmetry? The Galaxians laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Chaos. In engineering. Human, you speak of heresy against the fundamental laws of design. "I'll take her," Sarah declared, pulling up the salvage contract on her tablet. "Name your price." "You can have it for free," Valcor said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Consider it a lesson in humility. When you fail, and you will fail, perhaps you'll learn to respect the wisdom of your betters." As the Galaxians walked away, Sarah began her preliminary survey of the ship. Her scanner revealed layers of complexity hidden beneath the dust-covered surface. The supposed failed engine contained elements she recognized from a dozen different species' tech bases, combined in ways that were either madness or genius. She activated her comlink. "Hey, Rodriguez," she called to her partner back at their workshop. "Remember that crazy theory I had about using quantum entanglement to stabilize an asymmetric warp field? I'm going to need every piece of equipment we've got. I just found our perfect test subject." The ship hummed beneath her touch, as if responding to her plans. In that moment, Sarah knew two things with absolute certainty. This vessel wasn't just salvage, it was destiny. And when she was done with it, she would show the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength lay not in perfection, but in our ability to find beauty in the flaws, to create order from chaos, and to dream beyond the boundaries of what others deemed possible. As the twin suns set behind the mountains of scrap, casting long shadows across the salvage yard, Sarah began the laborious process of documenting every inch of her new acquisition. The Galaxians had missed something fundamental about this ship's design, something that only a species comfortable with imperfection could possibly understand. And she was going to prove it, one impossible modification at a time. 3 months of sleepless nights had transformed Sarah's workshop into a maze of holographic projections and scattered components. The impossible floated in the center of her massive hangar, suspended by gravity nullifiers, its hull now stripped to reveal the revolutionary technology beneath. Every surface was covered with her annotations, mathematical formulas dancing in the air around the ship like luminous fireflies. Rodriguez stood at his workstation, his dark eyes fixed on the latest simulation results. "Sarah, these power readings are off the charts. The quantum matrix is generating energy levels that shouldn't be possible." He ran his hands through his silver-streaked hair, a nervous habit he'd developed over 30 years of engineering work. "If we're wrong about this, the feedback loop could vaporize half the station." Sarah emerged from beneath the ship's belly, her coveralls stained with exotic lubricants and smart metal residue. "We're not wrong," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. "Look at the wave patterns." She gestured at one of the floating diagrams. The Galaxians built this engine expecting perfect symmetry, but that's not how quantum fields work. They're inherently chaotic. She walked to the ship's core, where she'd installed her masterpiece, a hybrid quantum drive that combined Galaxian precision with human adaptability. Instead of fighting against quantum uncertainty, her design embraced it, using the natural chaos of the universe as a power source. "The trick isn't controlling the chaos," she explained, her eyes bright with the fever of discovery. "It's riding it, like surfing a wave." A sharp chime interrupted their discussion. The workshop's AI announced, "Incoming transmission from the Galaxian Engineering Council." The air shimmered as a holographic projection materialized. First, geometrist Valcor appeared, flanked by a dozen other Galaxian engineers. Their crystalline forms seemed to vibrate with barely contained outrage. "Human Chen." Valcor's voice crackled with static and disapproval. "Our monitoring stations have detected illegal power signatures from your workshop. You are in violation of 17 different safety protocols." Sarah straightened her spine, meeting the alien's gaze. "Your protocols assume conventional engineering principles. What we're doing here is anything but conventional. You've corrupted a Galaxian vessel with your primitive modifications," another engineer interjected. "This is a desecration of our technological heritage." "Corrupted?" Sarah laughed. "I've fixed your design flaws. Your engine couldn't work because you tried to impose perfect order on an imperfect universe. My modifications embrace that imperfection." She gestured to Rodriguez, who initiated their latest test sequence. The ship's core began to pulse with a deep, rhythmic hum. Waves of energy rippled through the quantum matrix, each one stronger than the last. The holographic readouts showed power levels climbing far beyond what any conventional engine could achieve. The Galaxians watched in horror as their supposedly failed design came to life, but in a way that violated everything they believed about proper engineering. The quantum field wasn't perfectly symmetrical. It twisted and danced like a living thing, yet remained surprisingly stable. "Impossible," Valcor whispered, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that suggested extreme distress. "You've broken every fundamental law of quantum engineering." "No," Sarah corrected him, her voice firm. "I've proven that your laws were too limited. The universe doesn't care about our rules. It cares about results." She walked around the ship, trailing her fingers along its hull. "You built this ship to break the light-speed barrier, but you were too afraid to break your own preconceptions first. Humans, We're good at breaking things, especially rules that don't make sense. The test sequence reached its peak. The quantum matrix stabilized at power levels 5 times higher than the original Galaxian design had attempted. The ship didn't just hum, it sang, a harmony of chaos and order that filled the workshop with its otherworldly music. By authority of the High Engineering Council, Valcor declared, his voice trembling, "You are ordered to cease this dangerous experimentation immediately." Sarah's response was to activate another system, one of her own design. A field of quantum probability waves surrounded the ship, making it appear to exist in multiple states simultaneously. You don't have authority over human innovation, first geometrist, and you're about to learn that the universe is far more interesting than your perfect equations suggest. The holographic transmission cut off abruptly, but Sarah barely noticed. She was already diving back into her work, making final adjustments to the systems that would soon revolutionize space travel. The Galaxians' reaction had confirmed what she'd suspected from the start. They weren't just afraid of failure. They were afraid of success that didn't fit their worldview. "Rodriguez," she called out, "start fabricating the quantum stabilizers. We're going to need them when the Council realizes they can't stop us with regulations." She paused, a mischievous smile playing across her face. "And send them our test data. Let's show them exactly what primitive human engineering can accomplish." As her partner hurried to comply, Sarah returned to her beloved ship. The impossible lived up to its name more with each passing day, but she was about to prove that impossible was just another word for hasn't been done yet. And she was going to do it in true human fashion, messily, creatively, and with a healthy disregard for the established order of things. The news spread through the galaxy's engineering circles like a quantum cascade reaction. A human mechanic had not only restored the infamous failed Galaxian prototype, but had fundamentally altered its operating principles. The Galaxian Engineering Council's attempts to suppress information about Sarah's success only fueled the growing interest in her achievement. 30 days after her successful power trials, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. The massive doors of her workshop slid open to reveal Supreme Geometrist Enkstill, the head of the Galaxian Engineering Council. Unlike the other crystalline beings Sarah had encountered, Enkstill's form was so precisely engineered that it seemed to bend light itself, creating complex geometric patterns in the air around him. "Human Chen," Enkstill's voice resonated through the workshop. "Your modifications to our prototype have created quite a stir among the younger engineers. Some are even beginning to question our fundamental principles." Sarah set down her tools and approached the Supreme Geometrist, noting the way his crystalline surface rippled with barely contained emotions. "Maybe it's time for those principles to be questioned," she replied. "Perhaps." Enkstill moved closer to the impossible, studying its modified hull with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the metal itself. "Our preliminary analysis of your test data suggests that your unconventional approach may have merit. However, theoretical success is not the same as practical application." Sarah crossed her arms, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Are you challenging me to prove it works?" "The annual Galactic speed trials begin in 60 days, Enkstill announced. "The most advanced ships from all spacefaring races compete to push the boundaries of faster-than-light travel. The Galaxian Engineering Council formally invites you to enter your vessel." The workshop fell silent except for the gentle hum of the impossible's quantum core. Sarah knew this wasn't just an invitation. It was a trap, a chance for the Galaxians to publicly discredit her work. But it was also an opportunity she couldn't refuse. "The course runs through the maelstrom," Enkstill continued, referring to a notoriously dangerous region of space where quantum fluctuations made conventional FTL travel nearly impossible. "Our newest ships, designed with perfect geometric precision, have achieved speeds that approach the theoretical limit. Do you truly believe your improvised modifications can compete?" Sarah walked to her ship, placing her hand on its hull. The quantum field responded to her touch, creating ripples of probability that danced across the surface. "Your ships fight against the maelstrom's chaos," she said. "Mine will dance with it." "Then we have an agreement." Till's form shifted, producing a crystalline data tablet containing the official entry documents. "One condition," Sarah said, taking the tablet. "When I win, the Galaxian Engineering Council publicly acknowledges that there's more than one path to innovation. That sometimes imperfection and adaptation are more valuable than rigid perfection." Till's surface flickered with what might have been amusement. "And when you lose, you will surrender the vessel and all research data for proper disposal. We cannot allow dangerous technologies to threaten the established order." Sarah signed the entry form with a flourish. "Deal. But I should warn you, humans have a long history of turning other species' trash into treasure. You might not like what happens when we start playing with your discarded toys." After Till departed, Rodriguez emerged from the back of the workshop, where he'd been monitoring the exchange. "They're scared," he observed. "You can see it in their crystalline patterns. They're not just afraid of losing the race. They're afraid of what it means if you win." Sarah was already pulling up the specifications for the Maelstrom racecourse, her mind racing with modifications they'd need to make. "Good," she said. "Fear makes people rigid, predictable. And predictable is exactly what we don't want to be when we're pushing the boundaries of physics." The next weeks were a blur of activity. Sarah and Rodriguez worked around the clock, fine-tuning the impossible systems for the unique challenges of the Maelstrom. They installed probability anchors to ride the quantum waves, chaos inductors to harmonize with the spatial distortions, and a revolutionary navigation system that treated the ship's position as a quantum superposition rather than a fixed point. Word of the upcoming competition spread throughout human space. Sarah began receiving messages of support from mechanics, engineers, and tinkerers across the colonies. They recognized this as more than just a race. It was a chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength lay in our ability to adapt, to see possibilities where others saw only problems. As the day of the trials approached, Sarah spent more and more time in the cockpit, learning to feel the quantum fluctuations through the ship's sensors. The impossible wasn't just a machine anymore. It was becoming an extension of her will, a partnership between human intuition and laws of physics that the Galaxians claimed couldn't be broken. "They think precision and perfection are the only paths to advancement," she told Rodriguez as they made their final preparations. "We're going to show them that sometimes the best solutions come from embracing the chaos, from being willing to try things that shouldn't work." The night before they were scheduled to depart for the trials, Sarah stood alone in her workshop, looking up at her creation. The Impossible's quantum core pulsed with a gentle rhythm, like a heartbeat, ready to make history. She whispered to the ship. In response, the quantum field surrounding the vessel flickered with patterns that shouldn't have been possible, a dance of probability and potential that seemed to say, "Just try to stop us." The starting line for the Galactic speed trials was a sight that made even veteran spacers stop and stare. 20 ships hovered in perfect formation at the edge of the Maelstrom, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. The Galaxian vessels dominated the field, their geometrically perfect forms a stark contrast to the Impossible's unconventional silhouette. Sarah sat in her cockpit, running final system checks while the quantum core hummed beneath her feet. Through the viewport, she could see the Maelstrom itself, a vast region of space where reality seemed to fray at the edges. Quantum storms raged through the sector, creating distortions that could tear conventional ships apart. "All competitors, final countdown initiating," announced the race controller's voice over the comm. "May the most perfect vessel prevail." Sarah couldn't help but smile at the Galaxian turn of phrase. Perfection wasn't going to win this race. Adaptation would. The starting signal flashed across space. 20 ships surged forward, their engines flaring as they approached the Maelstrom's edge. The Galaxian vessels moved in precise formation, their perfect geometries cutting through space like crystal arrows. But Sarah had other plans. Instead of fighting against the Maelstrom's chaos, She guided the impossible straight into the heart of a quantum storm. The ship's sensors came alive, probability waves dancing across her control panels as the vessel's systems began to resonate with the surrounding turbulence. "That's it," she whispered, feeling the ship respond to her touch. "Let's show them how to dance." The first casualties of the maelstrom came quickly. 3 ships, their conventional FTL drives overwhelmed by the spatial distortions, dropped out of the race. The Galaxian vessels pushed forward in a defensive pattern, their combined fields creating a bubble of artificial stability. Sarah watched her competitors approach with professional interest. Their solution was elegant, precise, and completely wrong for the environment. They were trying to impose order on chaos instead of working with it. The Impossible's quantum core pulsed faster as Sarah engaged her chaos inductors. Instead of fighting the maelstrom's random fluctuations, her ship began to anticipate them, riding the probability waves like a surfer on an ocean. Each distortion became a boost, each quantum eddy a shortcut through space-time. "Impossible," came a shocked voice over the comm, one of the Galaxian pilots. "The human vessel is accelerating through a Class 9 disruption field." Sarah didn't bother responding. She was too focused on the dance, guiding her ship through patterns that existed more in probability than in regular space. The impossible wasn't just moving through the maelstrom, it was becoming part of it, a quantum phenomenon in its own right. Halfway through the course, the true challenge revealed itself. The heart of the maelstrom contained a region where multiple reality phases overlapped, creating a maze of potential paths. The Galaxian ships hesitated, their sensors struggling to identify the single correct route. But Sarah had prepared for this. She activated her probability anchor, allowing the impossible to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. The ship didn't need to choose one path. It could explore them all, collapsing into the most advantageous route as reality resolved itself. "Chen." Supreme Geometrist Anxtil's voice crackled over the emergency channel. "Your vessel is violating fundamental laws of quantum mechanics. You must abort before you trigger a cascade failure." Sarah checked her readings. The impossible systems were running hot, pushing the boundaries of what should be possible, but everything was holding together. "The laws aren't being violated," she replied calmly. "They're being reinterpreted." The final stretch of the race was a gauntlet of temporal eddies, places where time itself became unstable. The remaining Galaxian ships, still clinging to their formation, tried to power through with brute force. 2 more dropped out as their chronometric shielding failed. But the impossible danced. Sarah let her ship's quantum field synchronize with the temporal fluctuations, using them to skip through microseconds of space-time, like stones across a pond. Each jump brought them closer to the finish line, riding waves of probability that the Galaxians' perfect equations said couldn't exist. In the final moments, as the finish line came into view, Sarah saw that one Galaxian ship remained in contention, Anxtil's personal vessel, a masterpiece of crystalline engineering. The Supreme Geometrist's ship was pushing its perfect systems to their absolute limit, fighting against the very nature of the maelstrom with every meter gained. The race would come down to a fundamental question. Could flawless design overcome adaptive chaos? Sarah laid her hands on the controls one last time, feeling the quantum harmonics surge through her ship. "Time to make the impossible possible," she whispered, and engaged her final modification, a system that didn't just ride the quantum waves, but became one with them. The impossible's form blurred as it existed in multiple states at once, probability and reality merging in a display that would give Galaxian physicists nightmares for years to come. The ship didn't just cross the finish line. It arrived there as if it had always been destined to win, the only possible outcome in an infinite sea of quantum possibilities. As reality settled back into its normal patterns, the race official's announcement was almost anticlimactic. Winner of the 2874 Galactic Speed Trials, the impossible, piloted by Sarah Chen of Earth. The human spectators erupted in cheers, while the Galaxian observers stood in stunned silence. Sarah brought her ship to rest, its quantum core still humming with the echoes of its historic run. She had done more than win a race. She had proven that the path to the future wasn't through perfect order, but through understanding and embracing the beautiful chaos that existed in the heart of reality itself. The aftermath of the Galactic speed trials sent shockwaves through the interstellar engineering community. Sarah Chen's victory wasn't just a triumph of human ingenuity. It was a fundamental challenge to centuries of established scientific doctrine. The impossible had achieved what the galaxy's finest minds had declared impossible, and it had done so using parts that had been quite literally thrown away. 1 week after the race, Sarah stood before the assembled Galaxian Engineering Council in their crystalline chamber. Supreme geometrist Anxtil's form had lost some of its perfect symmetry, his surface showing traces of the stress the past days had brought to his position. "The terms of our agreement must be honored," Anxtil announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. "The Council acknowledges that there may be alternative paths to innovation beyond our traditional approaches." Sarah noticed how the younger Galaxian engineers at the edges of the chamber seemed to vibrate with barely contained excitement. Their crystalline forms shimmered with patterns that suggested new ideas already forming, new possibilities being considered. "But," Anxtil continued, "we must understand how you achieved this. Our analysis of your victory shows that your ship didn't just survive the maelstrom. It actually grew stronger within it. This defies all known principles of quantum mechanics." Sarah stepped forward, activating a holographic display of the impossible's quantum core. "Your principles assume that order and chaos are opponents," she explained. "But in reality, they're dance partners. The universe isn't a perfect geometric shape. It's a living, breathing thing full of possibilities." She zoomed in on the hybrid systems she had created, showing how they worked with the natural quantum fluctuations instead of against them. "Every piece of technology in my ship was considered trash because it didn't fit your perfect models. But when you stop trying to force reality to match your equations and start listening to what the universe is telling you, amazing things become possible." A young Galaxian engineer named Six-Era stepped forward, her crystalline form refracting light and patterns that indicated intense curiosity. "The implications go beyond just spaceship design," she said. "If we apply this principle of adaptive resonance to other fields, energy production, terraforming, even our own physical forms." "Exactly," Sarah smiled. "The universe isn't waiting for us to impose our idea of perfection on it. It's waiting for us to understand its own kind of perfection, one that includes chaos, adaptation, and change." The next few months saw a transformation in galactic engineering that nobody could have predicted. The Galaxian Engineering Council, under pressure from a new generation of engineers inspired by Sarah's victory, began a comprehensive review of all their failed projects. Technologies that had been abandoned for not meeting their standards of perfection were re-examined with new eyes. Rodriguez, who had been quietly documenting everything since the beginning, found himself leading workshops for mixed teams of human and Galaxian engineers. "The real revolution," he told Sarah one evening, "isn't in the technology. It's in getting them to see that different doesn't mean wrong." The impossible became a symbol of this new approach to innovation. Sarah opened her workshop to engineers from all species, sharing her methods and learning from their perspectives in return. The ship's quantum core became a testing ground for ideas that would have been dismissed as ridiculous just months earlier. But perhaps the most significant change came in the form of a new tradition. Every year, engineering students from across the galaxy would gather at Outpost 47's salvage yard, the same yard where Sarah had found the impossible. Their challenge: to find potential in the abandoned and forgotten, to see value where others saw only failure. 5 years after her historic victory, Sarah stood at the entrance to that same salvage yard, watching a young Galaxian engineer lead a team of students through the maze of discarded ships. Their crystalline forms had evolved, showing organic patterns that would have been considered flaws in the old days. Now they were badges of honor, signs of engineers willing to think beyond the boundaries of conventional wisdom. What do you see? She heard the teacher ask their students as they approached a particularly deteriorated vessel. Possibility, came the reply, not just from one voice, but from many, spanning multiple species and engineering traditions. Sarah smiled, running her hand along the impossible's hull. The ship hummed in response, its quantum field dancing with patterns that still defied conventional explanation. They had done more than win a race or prove a point about engineering. They had shown the galaxy that true innovation comes not from pursuing perfection, but from embracing the beautiful imperfection of reality itself. As she watched the next generation of engineers beginning their own journeys of discovery, Sarah remembered something she had once told Rodriguez. The universe doesn't make mistakes. It creates opportunities. Sometimes it takes a scrap-eared philosopher to see them. The quantum core of the impossible pulsed gently, its rhythm matching the eternal dance of chaos and order that powered the cosmos. In that pulse was a message for anyone willing to listen. The future belongs not to those who demand perfection, but to those who can find beauty in the flaws, potential in the abandoned, and possibility in the impossible.